It is Monday, March 30th, 2020. It is 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so you know what time it is. It's time for a little bit of coin metal. And it was another No Jiu-Jitsu, get your ass kicked at Jiu-Jitsu Monday. They've been doing the streaming classes, but you know, it's not the same. And, you know, unlike a lot of the people in my class, I don't have anybody here to work with me, so it's not as exciting, you know? And just, if anything, it feels like I'm watching somebody else's Christmas party or something, and it's like, I don't know, it just doesn't, it doesn't fill the same niche as a jiu-jitsu class, you know? Call me a spoiled brat, whatever. But, you know, the fact of the matter is that I don't believe that the panic has been really worth it. I believe that this thing is survivable enough that even if we'd had even higher exposure rates than we have, and we'd had higher infection rates and even higher death rates than we've had. The fact of the matter is that it won't be as damaging as what we're currently doing is to the economy. And I know that sounds really like, you know, cold-hearted and whatnot, but when I say the economy, I'm talking about people's jobs. I'm talking about their paychecks. You know, the thing that they pay for their rent with and their electricity with and stuff. You know, and I know that some people envision we're just going to, like, transfer over to this UBI bullshit and everybody's going to be equal. You know, and if that were true, I wouldn't object to it at all. You know, I really wouldn't. I would just like sit back and enjoy my paycheck and all that. However, I don't see that that's going to be the case. You know, it might be the case for some people, but the fact of the matter is that some people will be enjoying a lot higher level of wealth than the rest of us. And their wealth will be dependent upon our imprisonment in their system. And when I say that, I mean like that you won't be able to like use your computer without whatever you create on it or whatever you do with it being committed to another party. And I find that to be like really offensive. I mean like really offensive. Because a computer is like a tool, right? It's to craft things electronic, you know? And to use things electronic and digital, right? It's like a hammer. It's not supposed to be, you know, like I don't owe the guy that like made the first hammer and patented it and whatever. Like when I make something with that fucking hammer, I don't have to pay that motherfucker some money, right? So like, and that motherfucker doesn't get a like bit of the IP or license of the IP or strict ownership of the IP that I produce with that hammer. But entities like Microsoft and stuff, fuck man, they want to harness in on that. You know, not just the process of you creating it, but shit, if there's anything of commercial value in there, they want the fucking rights to that shit too. It's pathetic. It is absolutely pathetic. You know, I think that in this time when we have as much technology at our hands as we currently do, that even to keep it all going, I mean, in like just a 7 billion person population, just to keep it all going, just to keep the technology that we have, we will have to have radical restructuring as far as our manufacturing is concerned, because the inevitability of the issues with regard to oil and its limited supply on this planet is making itself known. There are actual real world consequences for rehypothecating endlessly into the future. And, eventually the bill becomes due. Somebody wants something of real value, at the point of delivery. And if you can't deliver it, if you don't have it, well, somebody's going to die. Some people are going to get hurt. Some people are going to go to jail. And that pressure in and of itself has been stayed several times from from befalling the very entities that got us into this current situation, because there's some sort of promise out there that there's a payoff at least for one entity, if not a few, that's going to make it worth it. And see, I don't see a reality where that actually plays out. And I don't care if we're talking about a reality where we're all saturated with 5G towers and we're all like put under mind control suggestion by television and shit like that. At one point or another, your reality stops matching what's being suggested to you enough to where you have absolutely no choice but to acknowledge what really is. And I really believe we're at that point with a lot of things. That there's a disconnect coming where people are looking at the amount of money being printed by the Federal Reserve at this time, and whenever some sort of real quote-unquote emergency seems to pop up, which at this point seems to be nothing more than the organic activity, the organic economic activity out there is not enough to sustain the lavish lifestyles of some entities. And so we're having to pare back a little bit, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants to feel that pain. We just borrow a few more trillion, and we can just make it go away until tomorrow. Well, there's an inflection point where you start saying to yourself, well, wait a minute. If you're doing this, like, at the drop of a hat, for any surface emergency, like the ones that I actually know about, what are you doing behind the scenes? Like, how much money are you really releasing? Are you releasing money to entities that aren't included in these budgets that you're showing everybody else? Are you benefiting just yourself and your little friends too, and like not the rest of us proportionally? Are you seeing to your own interests a little bit too much? There's a point when even the fact that you are, becomes too obvious. When somebody next to you is in a scraggly ass shirt and it hasn't been washed in a week, and they're wearing sweats and Crocs, and they look at you and you got like the nice tailored suit. You clearly got your manicure this week. They might like hunt you down in the parking lot and try and even up that distribution of wealth. And we don't see it very much in America, because by the time that people actually get to the point they're that low and desperate, they've been like cordoned off into some micro community somewhere like Skid Row or some shit like that, and people just don't hear from them. But I think that we're going to be producing enough entities that are like of that economic capability, that their desperation, isn't gonna keep them off the street, and they're gonna be seeing you. They're gonna be seeing you getting out of your pricey automobile while they've been forced to walk everywhere, or worse yet, travel in the disease bins we call public transport, and they'll be seeing you. They'll be seeing you. Anyway. It is with that I want to go ahead and throw into some music. And just to let you guys know, I made some purchases recently, and so we got some additions. The first of which being one that I've been wanting this for a very, very long time. Like, since I heard it was going to be released, I'm like, oh my god, Body Count's going to come out with another album. And the other day, it came in the mail. And so here it is, Bum Rush, because it's exactly what I'm fucking talking about, and it's off of Carnivore, Body Count's latest album, Bum Rush, First Dance, here on Coin Metal. And that was Death Clock with I Ejaculate Fire. You can't do better than that, really. Anywho, as far as where we're going to go today, I wanted to start off this with just probably one of the very few things that you will hear me actually read concerning Corona, and it's only because it flies completely against the narrative. And not only that, it is somebody who has been at least partially pushing the narrative, or a narrative, in New York. And so here we go. This is on American Institute for Economic Research, AIER.org. We were wrong, so sorry that we ruined your life. And this is by Jeffrey A. Tucker, so yes, penis. And this is authored March 28th, 2020. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, is moving up in the betting odds for getting the Democratic presidential nomination, even though he is not running. The reason is that binge-watching news hounds have noticed something about his comportment during this crisis. He seems just slightly struggling to know what's true. Sometimes he's even honest. Consider this. On Thursday, March 26, Cuomo dared question the orthodoxy that has wrecked countless businesses and lives. He revealed what actual experts are saying quietly all over the world, but had not yet been discussed openly in the endless public relations spin broadcasts all day and night. He said the following, quote, "If you rethought that or had time to analyze that public health strategy, I don't know that you would say quarantine everyone. I don't even know that was the best public health policy. Young people then quarantined with older people was probably not the best public health strategy, because younger people could have been exposing the older people to an infection. Further, quote, what we did was we closed everything down. That was our public health strategy. Just close everything, all businesses, old workers, young people, old people, short people, tall people. Every school closed, everything." It's true that anyone following this unfolding fiasco and the gradually emerging data behind it knows that Cuomo is right. The response has not been modern and scientific. It has been medieval and mystical. The theory behind the policy has been nothing but a panicked cry of run and hide before the noxious gas gets you. Lacking reliable data, which is the fault of the CDC and FDA, we replace knowledge with power. In the end, this fiasco is an epistemic crisis. Epistemic crisis. As Ed Young has written in a beautifully detailed article for The Atlantic, quote, "The testing fiasco was the original sin of the American pandemic failure, the single flaw that underlined every other countermeasure. Even the wide acceptance of social distancing as a norm, however much it helps curb the spread, presumes this absence of knowledge. Stay away from everyone as much as possible, a slogan that reveals how little we know. And yet, lacking that knowledge, the politicians, cheered on by the media, acted in ways that have fundamentally wrecked life as we knew it, all in the course of a couple of weeks. The massive knowledge gap was filled by a cascade of predictive models made possible by modern statistical packages readily available by subscription to any member of the clerisy. If this and this and this, and if this and this and this, and then enter. Out pops what appears to be a precise presentation of our future under the following conditions, along with an overlay of embedded cause and effect assumptions about certain policies followed or not followed. Day after day, we are bombarded with such predictions, and we paid close attention because we had little in the way of actual on-the-ground facts that have been available to us in previous disease panics. It then became a perfect storm. Risk-averse politicians deciding to do something, anything to avoid blame. Bureaucrats doing what they do best, which is telling people no, you cannot innovate, and you cannot produce, you cannot distribute. Local tyrants stopping price gouging and therefore preventing the price system from working. A howling media famished for eyeballs, ears, and clicks. A public panicked about disease and death. An egregious dividing of people into essential and non-essential. Policy snares, tangles, missed opportunities all the way around. The cacophony of information chaos has been palpable, unbearable. All the while, a few knowledgeable experts have been trying their best to weigh in and get some slight attention for rationality. My heart in particular goes out to the esteemed Professor John Ioannidis, who has been exposing fake science based on bad data his entire life and has been previously celebrated for doing so. He writes as often as he can while still trying to be as precise and accurate as he can. Apparently, such high-end people have a private email list in which they share observations and data while doing their best to bring calm while civilization is falling apart. His first salvo appeared on March 17th. God bless the National Post for publishing Ioannidis' latest exasperated piece. Quote, at the moment, we are enacting extremely severe measures in an effort to do something. However, we have very little evidence-based data on how to guide our next steps. We really don't know where we are headed, whether our measures are effective, or if we need to modify them. There is a possibility that many of our aggressive measures could be doing more harm than good, especially if they are to be maintained in the long term. There will be more major consequences in terms of lives lost, major disruptions to the economy, to the society, and to our civilization. Unless we start acting now, of course, like start planting some shit. I mean, really, can you grow anything? Start planting some fucking veggies or something. You know, something with a high turnover rate. Anyway, continuing on. At this juncture, we need to act swiftly. At the same time, we need to act equally swiftly to collect unbiased data that will tell us how many people are infected, the chances that someone who is infected will have a serious outcome and die, how the epidemic is evolving in different settings and places around the world, and what difference we are making with the measures that we are taking. This information can make a huge difference, and there is a lot that can go wrong if we don't have the right data. This has been an acute situation. At the same time, collecting reliable data should not take time and should not halt our decision-making process. Getting information on representative samples of the population is very easy. It has been done in Ireland, in Iceland, where they have a cohort covering most of the national population looking at samples that have been provided. They see that they have an infection rate of 1.0%, and up until now, only 2 people have died. So, out of the 3,500 infected people in Iceland, there have been 2 deaths, which corresponds to an infection fatality rate lower than the common flu. Of course, some people may be infected later, but nevertheless, these estimates would be very different compared to the original claims of case fatality rates of 3.4% that were circulated. At the same time, we have other pieces of evidence that the number of people who are infected is much larger compared with the number of cases we have documented. In most places, with few exceptions around the world, we are just testing people who have substantial symptoms, who have come to seek health care, or even to be hospitalized. These are just the tip of the iceberg. The Iceland experience and other data from Rome and Italy, where entire city populations were tested, shows that the vast majority of people are either completely asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic in ways that you would not be able to differentiate from common cold or common flu. This information makes a huge difference while we are proceeding with aggressive measures of social distancing and lockdowns that may have tremendous repercussions, especially in the long term. As the song says, stop making sense. I write on Saturday morning, March 28th, and right now there are two contrary strains about to collide. On the one hand, you have scientists reducing their death rate predictions further and further, lopping off zeros by the day. On the other hand, this is accompanied by appalling levels of despotism, even to the point of the National Guard checkpoints at state borders and restrictions on what you can buy, even at, quote, essential stores. The gigantic gap between emerging professional medical consensus and appalling policy ignorance is revealing as never before the practical impossibility of scientific public policy. Then you have the cascade of unintentional and unexpected outcomes of the rush to coerce. It began with Trump's disastrous block on flights from Europe that sent millions scrambling for tickets that led to an unspeakable crush of people standing shoulder to shoulder at our nation's airports, contradicting the demand that people social distance just when the virus was revealing itself as highly contagious, the very opposite of intended results. That's just the beginning. I doubt seriously that the political class in this country, as low as regard I have, set out to destroy all that we call civilized life, instantly generating millions of unemployed workers and bankrupt businesses all around, not to mention a pandemic of utter hopelessness on the part of vast swaths of the world's population. Still, this is what they've managed to achieve. This is what their pretense of knowledge, as supposed actual wisdom, has unleashed on the world, with incalculable human cost. As for economics, are we talking recession, depression? These words indicate cyclical changes in business conditions. My friend Gene Epstein suggests another term for what we are going through, the Great Suppression. There will be months, years, and decades in which to more clearly observe there will be months, years, and decades in which to more clearly observe the countless ways in which the suppressors plied error upon error, blockage upon blockage, to add to the grotesquerie. What truly should inspire us right now are the grocers, pharmacists, truck drivers, manufacturers, doctors, and nurses, construction workers, service station attendants, webmasters, volunteers of all sorts, philanthropists, and specialists in a huge variety of essential professions who keep life functioning more or less. And let us not forget the, quote, unessential people. It is an incorrect and vicious term, who have innovated ways around the Great Suppression to continue to serve others, keep rent being paid, and food on their tables. They are the means of salvation out of this mess. The market, hobbled and bludgeoned, still loves you. As for the politicians, Andrew Cuomo has admitted some of the error. In a much welcome change, he has even deregulated medical services. That's just a hint of the humility and humanity embedded in these statements and actions. We need more of that. Vastly more. If only to contribute to calming things down enough to gain some perspective and hopefully some eventual realization in the quote land of the free and the home of the brave. A virus should be regarded as a disease to mitigate and cure, not an excuse to bludgeon life on Earth as we know it. Goddamn right. Well, Jeffrey, I think it's taken a crisis for you to remember the fact that you are in fact a libertarian. You know, it's funny, you kind of had a little bit of a liberal drift there for a while, and I think it was because of the popularity of Bernie Sanders and how he was kind of getting a little softer touch by the media and whatnot, including him on TV and whatnot. But I think that's probably gone away a little bit, and so he's starting to get it that it's pro tem, playing their game, being their people, being one of them, for them. It's a pro tem thing. As soon as you're too much of you again, well, you're just no use to them. And especially if you never fit the mold to begin with. If you had to migrate to them, you're the first to get discarded because you were never really one of them, And that's the funny part about it is that so many people, when things are really good and everything's cushy and they got plenty of excess to throw around and push their influence and shit, when that kind of stuff is going on, people kind of relax their guard. They're like, oh, I'm going to ride this high forever. I'm going to be in this perspective to everybody forever. And they do things like they begrudge other people that were, their contemporaries during the time when they were getting shit on. Now that they're getting a little more attention, and they start burning those bridges, man. Start really monetizing them to the maximum and shit, and exploiting them to the maximum. And then something like this comes along and humbles them a little bit and says, well, gosh, maybe I did drink a little bit too much of the Kool-Aid. That tends to happen if you go to the same parties and whatnot. But in any case, it's just it's nothing you can really blame anybody for. It's how your social circle changes. Of course, you're going to change just a little bit. It just goes with it. It happens. But the question for you has to always be, at what point, is it really beneficial for me? Am I drifting far enough away from what is my base, my belief system? Am I having to drift too far from that in order to fulfill a temporary economic goal? And more importantly, and this is the one to really keep in mind, how far along am I in my progression? Am I going somewhere? And if I am going somewhere, how far along am I? Does it seem like I am further along than I was yesterday or even a year ago? And if so, what's it really going to cost me to up and bail it at this point? What will it really mean for me? If I were to walk away from it right now, what would I potentially be missing out on given the investment that I've already put into it? And it's a tough cross to bear. At some point you do have to look at it and say, is it really worth it or whatever? But, if it's really worth it to begin with to just do, it kind of sets the bar really low as far as like what it has to do further from there to fulfill any real goal. And it's kind of like this show for me. It's like I get a lot of joy just doing this because I know that somebody out there gets some value out of it. I know they do. And that's good enough for me. Even if it's just hearing a contrary voice to something that they're finding elsewhere, that's good enough for me. And if it means something more to them, that's even better. Anyway, as far as what we're going to get into further than this, and that was a little bit long. I didn't really examine how long it was to begin with, and that was my fault. My apologies. But I do have some other stuff I wanted to get into today. And I was thinking about this coin right here. I tracked down a little white paper, and I'm genuinely curious about it because it's a concept that we've talked about on this show, and I'm curious to explore, to find out a little bit more about the conditions of it. And as a matter of fact, I think we'll do that because, I mean, it's only 10 pages, and I'm sure there's probably going to be some math in there and some diagrams and shit like that. And I haven't quite figured out how to read that stuff aloud on this show to where people that really know the math will be like, oh yeah, oh wow, that's so cool. You know what I mean? Like, when I get to that point, you'll fucking know it. But anyway, yeah, we're going to read this white paper on the other side of it. DDoSCoin, cryptocurrency with a malicious proof of work. And it's funny because I read a little bit of it, and they're actually talking about proof of stake. So I don't know if they're really talking about it as a proof of work coin or a proof of stake coin. And I'm not even sure if this thing ever deployed. But I find the concept of it interesting, and I'm kind of wondering about the application of it. So I think that we should definitely explore this one on the other side of the music break. Because, yeah, it is kind of long. And it's long enough that if we put in a music break now, we can manage it just fine and dandy. Anyway, but as far as where we're going to go next on music, that's the question. And you know, I haven't played any Sixth in a while, and so that seems as good a place as any to start. And so, yeah, The Scent of the Obscene by Sixth, here on Coin Metal. I was going to let that run, but that's The Way of All Flesh by Gojira, and it's like 30 minutes long, so we're not going to... No, 17 minutes long. Anyway, we're not going to listen to all of it. It's too fucking long. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into this white paper. And, you know, it's not like all of the stuff that I read on this show is, like, absolutely current or whatnot. I like to read them because I like to keep people's minds active as far as things that have been done in this space and concepts that are available in this space already. Things like adversarial actors. You don't hear people talk about those, or central points of failure. And it's really funny to me because there's this big ass push to try and get things that are centralized and get them passed off as quote unquote cryptocurrencies, much like that thing that we read about Microsoft the other day. Everything about that project includes quote unquote centralized entities. Whether or not we're talking about Microsoft itself or a third party associated with Microsoft through this common coin, the fact is that they're in control of some aspect of the coin, and they can modify the coin as they see fit without your knowledge or consent or anything like that. And that's just not acceptable, especially when we do have currencies out there, cryptocurrencies specifically, that you do have a choice as to whether or not you can participate in them. And so I got this one here. It's a white paper for DDoSCoin, cryptocurrency with a malicious proof of work. And this is by Eric Woostrow, University of Colorado Boulder. I did a little sniffing around. Apparently he still does teach there. I'm not entirely sure on that. And Benjamin Vandersloot, University of Michigan. So yes, double penis. Abstract. Since its creation in 2009, Bitcoin has used a hash-based proof of work to generate new blocks and create a single public ledger of transactions. The hash-based computational puzzle employed by Bitcoin is instrumental to its security, preventing Sybil attacks and making double spend attacks much more difficult. However, there have been concerns over the efficiency of this proof of work puzzle and alternative useful proofs that have been proposed. In this paper, we present DDoSCoin, which is a cryptocurrency with a malicious proof of work. DDoSCoin allows miners to prove that they have contributed to a distributed denial of service attack against specific target servers. The proof involves making a large number of TLS connections to a target server and using cryptographic responses to prove that a large number of connections has been made. Like proof-of-work puzzles, these proofs are inexpensive to verify and can be made arbitrarily difficult to solve. Introduction. Cryptocurrencies rely on proof-of-work that require miners to spend large amount of effort to solve a specific puzzle. Solutions to these puzzles, on the other hand, are designed to be inexpensive to verify. And hold on a second, I got a little bit of a disruption. Oh, that's why. This fucking song is like 8 years long and it's got a big old gap in the middle of it. Anyway, continuing on. Cryptocurrencies rely on proof of work requiring miners to spend a large amount of effort to solve a specific puzzle. Solutions to these puzzles, on the other hand, are designed to be inexpensive to verify. In Bitcoin, the proof of work is a computational puzzle based on the SHA-256 hash function, and miners are tasked with finding a partial preimage. The best way to do this is to iterate over a large number of inputs to the hash function and check if the output hash satisfies the partial image target. In simplified terms, to find an input that hashes to n bits of zeros, the miner must perform an average of 2n hashes, or 2 to the n hashes. Once such an input is found, other miners and Bitcoin nodes can verify the puzzle solution with a single hash. Although the proof of work used in Bitcoin gives it resistance to Sybil attacks, the amount of computational effort carried out collectively by its miners does not contribute to any useful problems besides securing the currency from attack. Indeed, this computational effort is substantial. As of 2016, miners collectively performed roughly 10 to the 18 or 2 to the 60 hashes, or 2 to the 60th hashes every second. Or 2, yeah, okay. Many see this distributed computation as a colossal waste of CPU resources, and researchers have proposed alternative cryptocurrencies or altcoins that aim to have more beneficial proofs of work, that provide utility beyond securing the underlying currency, finding chains of large primes, or proving the archive of data. In this paper, however, we investigate going in the opposite direction and propose an altcoin that has a malicious proof of work that is externally detrimental. In particular, we propose a proof of work that allows miners to prove that they have participated in a distributed denial of service or DDoS attack against a particular target. Miners are incentivized to send and receive large amounts of network traffic to and from the target in order to produce a valid proof of work. As in other cryptocurrencies, these proofs can be inexpensively verified by others, and the original miner can collect a reward. This reward can be sold for other currencies, including Bitcoin, or even traditional currencies, allowing botnet owners and other attacks to directly collect revenue for their assistance in decentralized DDoS attack. The malicious proof of DDoS operates by having miners create a large number of TLS connections to a target web server and using the server's signed responses as a proof of connection. In modern versions of TLS, the server signs a client-provided parameter during the handshake, along with server-provided values used in the key exchange of the connection. This allows the client to prove to others that it has communicated with the server. In addition, the signed value returned by the server is not predictable to the client and is randomly distributed. Thus, clients can use a similar trick as in Bitcoin and only report connections that match some rare threshold. such as the signature from the server starts with n bits of zeros. On average, it will take clients 2 to the n connections to produce such a proof. Although the malicious proof of DDoS only works against websites that support TLS 1.2 as of April 2016, over 56% of the Alexa top million websites support this version of TLS. Furthermore, we expect this number to increase as TLS support becomes more widespread. Using our proof of DDoS, we conceptualize a cryptocurrency that uses it, which we call DDoSCoin. In addition to using proof of DDoS, DDoSCoin allows miners to select the victim servers by consensus using a proof-of-stake protocol. Rather than specify a single website or static list that DDoSCoin miners target, choosing from them by consensus allows the choice of who is attacked to be made collectively and fairly by DDoSCoin participants. Contributions. Propose a novel conceptual cryptocurrency, DDoSCoin, whose proof-of-work incentivizes miners to participate in a DDoS attack and allows them to prove that they have done so. Describe a way for target victims to be chosen by consensus of its participants. Implement our proof-of-work function and evaluate its performance and impact. Discuss several defenses against such cryptocurrency that potential victims can employ. Number 2, related work. Many alternate cryptocurrency protocols have been proposed since the creation of Bitcoin. Although none have yet eclipsed the popularity of Bitcoin, many so-called altcoins have interesting innovations, often in the form of alternative proof-of-work. For example, Litecoin uses script in place of SHA-256 in its proof-of-work, with the intention of being ASIC resistant, in order to allow anyone to mine competitively with only a CPU. Permacoin is a proposed altcoin that uses a novel proof of storage. Rather than waste computational resources solving a useless proof-of-work puzzle, such as in Bitcoin, miners are instead incentivized to store parts of a large agreed-upon file. In order to be competitive for Permacoin, miners prove that they can retrieve an assigned portion of the file. In Primecoin, miners search for special chains of prime numbers. Although Primecoin has found several large Cunningham and bitwin prime chains, it remains unclear if such primes have any practical use. TorPath proposes a proof-of-bandwidth altcoin that incentivizes users to participate in the Tor network. However, it relies on a set of semi-trusted centralized servers to assign Tor circuits to clients. It is also susceptible to collision and Sybil attacks by participants. However, many of these attacks are outside the threat model of TorPath, as it requires performing those attacks against the underlying Tor network. In contrast, DDoSCoin does not require any centralized parties for the proof of DDoS besides trusting existing TLS certificate authorities to validate domains. Although Bitcoin uses a scripting language for transactions, the allowed operations are very limited. Ethereum allows transactions to be programmable contracts whereby a transaction can be specified in a custom scripting language with arbitrary logic, including conditional payments or fee collection. While the Ethereum virtual machine that executes these contracts does not provide external network access to the scripts, it could still be used to implement some parts of DDoSCoin. For example, it is possible to create an Ethereum contract that pays a bounty to anyone that can provide a proof of DDoS for a specified target. This would effectively accomplish the same outcome as pay_to_DDoS described in section 4.3.1 by implementing DDoSCoin's proof of DDoS verification. Background, or number 3, background. In this section, we review relevant basics of cryptocurrency. For more detail, we referred the reader to other resources. 3.1 Cryptocurrency. Bitcoin employs a hash-based proof-of-work protocol to construct a public ledger of transactions. In this protocol, miners attempt to solve a simple hash-based computational puzzle in order to mine blocks. Mining a block nets the miner a reward and the right to specify what new valid transactions should be included in the public ledger. To mine a block, a miner must find a hash of a block header that is less than an adjustable target. The block header includes the hash of the last block found, the Merkle root of the list of transactions the miner wants to include in this blocks, and a nonce. The easiest way to solve this puzzle is to iterate the nonce until the hash satisfies the target difficulty. Then the miner publishes the found block, and miners use this block as the latest block. Each block commits to a set of transactions where each must be valid for the next block to be considered valid, or for the block to be considered valid. Transactions in Bitcoin are scripts, and each new transaction specifies an output script that must be satisfied in order for the coins to be spent. The output for wait a minute. There's a figure here. The standard Bitcoin transaction script, transaction number 10 spends number 9 by providing a valid input script that, when prepended to transaction 9's output script, executes to produce a valid output. The output script stores a hash of a public key, verified using the op_dupe space op_hash 160 and op_equal verify opcodes, and it requires a valid signature over the spending transaction, verified via op_check sig. The coins to be spent. For example, an output script might specify that it requires a spending transaction to provide a valid signature, with the output script specifying the public key to validate it with. To spend such a transaction requires creating a new transaction that references the previous one and provides an input sig script that solves the previous transaction's output script pub key. In this case, a valid signature over the new transaction. This new transaction can then specify a new output script pub key for these coins. Figure 1 shows an example of a standard Bitcoin transaction script, and god damn it, I should have waited to read that. 3.2 Proof of Stake. Proof of stake is an alternative way of generating new blocks in a cryptocurrency. In this system, blocks are minted rather than mined based on how much stake the miner has in the currency, rather than their fraction of computational power. Proof of stake assumes that the underlying cryptocurrency is already somewhat distributed, for example, through prior use of a traditional proof-of-work system. There are several variants of proof of stake. In this subsection, we'll describe Peercoin, an active alternative cryptocurrency that employs a hybrid proof-of-work and proof-of-stake algorithm to mint blocks. For more details on proof of stake, we refer the reader to the Peercoin and NXT whitepapers. Peercoin's proof of stake allows currency holders to mint new blocks based on how many coin days they are able and willing to consume. Coin days consumed is a measure of the product of the amount of coins spent in a transaction and the number of days since they were last spent. For example, to consume 10 coin days, a currency holder can spend 10 pure coin that they have held for a day, or equivalently, spend 5 pure coins that were last spent 2 days ago. Note that the holder can spend these coins to anyone, or can send them to anyone, including themselves, in order to consume the coinage. To mint a new block, a minter creates a special transaction, presumably one where the minter pays themselves, where one of the inputs has been unspent for at least 30 days. The resulting transaction, along with a timestamp, must meet a certain hash target that gets easier proportional to how many coin days are consumed by the transaction. For example, if the current difficulty gives a minter consuming 100 days of a 1% chance of minting a block per second, a minter that was able to consume 200 coin days would have a 2% chance per second. The input to the hash includes information about the aged transaction as well as a current timestamp. If this hash is less than the current target multiplied by the number of coin days consumed in the transaction, then the transaction meets the proof-of-stake difficulty and a new block is minted. Although this looks similar to a proof-of-work check, where a hash is being compared to a target, here the only varying inputs are the long-lived input transaction and a coarse-grained timestamp with a resolution of 1 second. Thus, for each aged unspent transaction output they control, minters perform only 1 hash per second in order to solve the proof of stake. In Peercoin, coins cannot age beyond 90 days. Coins that have not been consumed after 90 days are counted as 90-day-old coins. This prevents very old coin holders from being able to disrupt the blockchain at a future date, potentially causing a large fork of the blockchain and destabilizing it. When a proof-of-stake block is minted, the minter is allowed to collect a small subsidy proportional to the coinage consumed in their proof-of-stake transaction. This serves as the only reward for a minter, as transaction fees are not collected by minters in Peercoin. Ooh, that's interesting. DDoSCoin design. Miners in DDoSCoin repeatedly create connections to a TLS victim server and check for a response that satisfies a target difficulty decided by the network. If the response satisfies this condition, then parameters of the TLS handshake can be published by the miner to create a new valid block. This connection is depicted in Figure 2. To begin, a miner generates a random 32-byte secret nonce, N. The miner also selects the latest block in the chain it is minting on and the set of transactions that the miner intends to include in this block, both as is done in Bitcoin. The miner then computes SHA-256 in parentheses previous _ block / Merkle _ root / n to generate the 32-byte client _random, where previous _ block is the SHA-256 hash of the previous block header. Merkle _ root is the Merkle root of transactions as computed in Bitcoin, and n is the random nonce. The miner initiates a TLS version 1.2 connection with the victim server using the client _random and choosing a set of cipher suites that will ensure the server will send a server key exchange message. This includes ephemeral Diffie-Hellman DHE and ephemeral elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, and ECDHE. We note that for the default cipher suite list sent by Google Chrome, over 94% of TLS 1.2 servers in the Alexa Top Million choose a cipher suite with a server key exchange message compatible with DDoSCoin. The server will respond with a server hello message containing a 32-byte server_random, the cipher suite that will be used, and other parameters that are not needed for the purposes of DDoSCoin. Next, the server sends its certificate chain and a server key exchange message. The certificate chain contains the server's signed TLS certificate, as well as intermediate certificate authorities that create a signature chain to a browser-trusted root CA. Inside the server certificate is a public key, as well as the identity of the server represented by its domain. The miner stores these for verification in case a block is found. In the server key exchange message, the server sends key exchange parameters such as the Diffie-Hellman parameters and the ephemeral public value generated by the server, or the curve parameters, and a public curve point in ECDHE. The server signs these key exchange parameters along with the client_random and server_random. This signature can be verified with the public key in the certificate. Since the server key exchange signature contains the client_random and server_random, the signature value will be unpredictable to the client ahead of time. In addition, each signature will be a random value that depends on the miner provided nonce. Thus, it can be used as a proof of work. If the SHA-256 hash of the server key exchange parameters, signature, and miner chosen nonce n is less than the current target difficulty, then this connection satisfies the proof of work threshold and can be used to form the next block. We hash n a second time in this way to prevent the victim's server from being able to tell if their response would satisfy the target difficulty. Otherwise, servers could simply withhold such infrequent responses and no blocks could be published for them. To make a block, the miner publishes the previous block's hash and transactions and their Merkle root, the nonce n, the server_random value, the server's certificate chain, the server key exchange parameters, and the server key exchange signature. 4.1. Validating blocks. To verify that a block is valid, miners must validate several items. First, they must validate that the previous block hash and Merkle roots are valid, as in Bitcoin. Next, they must recreate the client_random by hashing the previous block hash, transaction Merkle root, and provided nonce. Then, they must validate the certificate actually belongs to a valid victim server. This is done by checking that the certificate chain is valid, rooted in a trusted certificate authority, and the domain name is in a list of acceptable victims. This list of valid victim domains is generated by consensus, and details for its generation are discussed in section 4.3. After the victim has been verified to be a valid one, the public key is used to verify the server key exchange signature. This signature is over the client_random, server_random, and the key exchange parameters, server key exchange parameters, that is. Finally, the block must be verified to meet the current target difficulty. The server key exchange parameter signature and the block's nonce n are hashed using SHA-256 and compared to the current target difficulty. If it is less than the target, the block is a valid one and becomes the latest block in this chain. 4.2. earlier TLS versions. DDoSCoin is incompatible with versions of TLS before 1.2, including SSL, because the server key exchange signature does not include the client_random or any client-provided values. In earlier versions, the only value that provably comes from the server, i.e. is signed by a key tied to the victim's identity, does not contain any commitments from the client about the previous block or what transactions should be included in the block. If we were to accept blocks where there was only a server signature that met some target difficulty, any miner could steal another miner's found block and the contained block reward by changing the transactions and forwarding the block. If we were to somehow tie the previous block's hash and Merkle root into this proof, for example, by saying that the hash of the signature and a client-provided nonce had to be less than some target value, the proof of work becomes a computational puzzle. A miner only has to collect a single signature from the server and try different nonces until the hash of signature and nonce meets the target difficulty. Similarly, proof of work target difficulties cannot be based off of the purported shared secret that results from a connection, because the client can always choose different key exchange values to ensure that the resulting shared key is less than the threshold difficulty, resulting in a computational puzzle. Even values sent by the server, such as the finished message that contains a MAC dependent on the shared secret, can be recomputed by the client. As an aside, this interesting property gives rise to an observation that with respect to clients, the contents of TLS connections are deniable. That is, it is not possible for a client to record a TLS connection, including its chosen secrets, and report this to a third party in a way that cryptographically proves what the server says. This property has been accomplished in a different, more efficient way in various secure messaging protocols, such as off-the-record, OTR. Besides TLS 1.2, there are other cryptographic protocols that involve the server signing a client-chosen value. For example, the SSH protocol key exchange involves the server signing a hash over the previous handshake messages, including the client-provided identification, version string, and Diffie-Hellman public value. Either of these fields could be used to encode the necessary commitments, previous block, Merkle root, and nonce, used in DDoSCoin. However, SSH server identities are generally not signed by a trusted party, making verification that a miner has communicated with a particular server more challenging. Nonetheless, identities in an SSH-based DDoSCoin could simply be the server's host key, rather than a domain in a CA signature certificate. And I'm going to pause right there because I got just a little bit of phlegm building up here, so a little bit of water. No, I don't have the fucking COVID. God damn it. I just smoked too much pot. Anyways, as far as where to go with music, no, we covered that. No, we haven't covered that. A little bit of Slipknot. I feel it's in order. And, I don't know, Iowa's my favorite album, honestly. I really like the first album, but Iowa's good, and I don't know, I kind of like All Hope Is Gone, too. That kind of introduces a little problem there. I think I should stick with my first decision. Iowa, the Heretic Anthem, here on Coin Metal. And that was Rio Grande Blood by Ministry. It's one of my faves. Anywho, as far as what we're going to get into next, we're going to finish this thing up. We're on section 4.3, victim selection. If DDoSCoin accepted proofs against any TLS 1.2 server, miners would be incentivized to set up their own TLS servers locally and focus exclusively on, quote, attacking those servers instead of remote ones. Since the miner would have access to the private key for that server, they would not be required to even create network connections, reducing the proof of work to a computational puzzle rather than one based on participation in a denial of service over a network. To prevent this, DDoSCoin must have a way to agree on which victims are acceptable targets for the proofs of DDoS to be considered valid. Similarly, it is important to focus the denial of service effort toward a small number of victims in order to have the most impact. One simple solution is to hard-code a set of victim identities into the protocol. For example, DDoSCoin's published code could contain identities, domain names of Facebook servers, and only allow and incentivize attacks against them. However, there are many attackers that might feel uncomfortable attacking Facebook, but are willing to participate in attacks against other websites. In addition, having only a single or small set of victim websites is a risk to DDoSCoins. If those websites all go offline or successfully mitigate the attacks, no future DDoSCoin blocks can be mined, and the currency will stall. If this happened, all DDoSCoins in circulation would become nearly worthless, as there would be no way to safely transact them. These issues lead to a few subtle requirements for choosing valid victims. First, there must be limits on who is allowed to be a victim. Otherwise, miners can create local computational puzzles. At the same time, there must be enough targets in order to be robust against stalled blockchains. Similarly, the list of victims must be flexible in order to allow removing targets as they become impractical to attack, either through successful attack or mitigation, and adding new ones to their place. To address these issues, we propose two mechanisms that DDoSCoin can employ to allow victims to be selected by consensus. The first mechanism allows anyone to commit DDoSCoins to whoever can prove they sent an amount of traffic to a target, pay_to_DDoS. The second allows for updating the list of victim domains that miners are allowed to attack when mining for blocks. 4.3.1 Pay to DDoS. In order to allow victims to be temporarily selected for DDoSCoin allows bounties for targeting specific servers. To accomplish this, DDoSCoin introduces a new payment opcode, pay_to_DDoS, that can be used in transactions subject to certain constraints. This opcode takes two arguments in an output script, a string representing a domain name that the payer wishes to have attacked, and a target difficulty corresponding to the amount of connections the payer wishes to be made. Once this transaction is stored in a valid block, anyone can collect its reward by creating a connection to the specified victim server and obtaining a response that meets the given difficulty target. These connections are target difficulty rather. These connections are made similar to how miners connect to victim servers to create blocks, but with a few important differences. First, the client_random is generated as follows: SHA-256 TXID /output_script //n, where TXID is the transaction ID of the pay-to-DOS transaction and output script is the SHA-256 hash of the output script the payee wants to collect the payment with, and N is the 32-byte random nonce. The client then makes connections to the specified victim domain until it gets a response that meets the target difficulty specified by the pay-to-DDoS transaction, i.e. the hash of the key exchange parameters, signature, and nonce are less than the target hash value. The bounty poster must select a difficulty that is appropriate for the target and reward. If the difficulty is too high, no miner will attack the target because the miners do not want to waste effort. Also, if the difficulty is too low, the reward will be claimed for little degradation of service. To collect the bounty reward, the client creates an input script that will satisfy the pay-to-DDoS output. This includes the parameters of the connection, the nonce, the server random value, the server's certificate chain, the server key exchange parameters, and the server key exchange signature. To validate the transaction, a miner must compute the client random as above. Then, the miner must verify... Damn it, I went too far. Then, where is it? Keys for signature to validate transaction must compute. Then the miner must verify that the certificate is valid for the provided domain and rooted in a trusted CA, and that the certificate signature over the server key exchange message is valid. Finally, the server must check that the server's response meets the target difficulty specified by the pay-to-DDoS transaction. If it does, then the transaction is valid and can be included in a block, letting the client collect the reward. There are a couple important features of this transaction. First, the reason the transaction ID of the pay-to-DDoS transaction is committed to in the client random is to prevent a client from double claiming multiple bounty rewards with the same proof of DOS. There it is. Similarly, the client commits to the output script of the claiming transaction to prevent others from being able to swap it for their own, thereby stealing the proof of DOS and collecting the reward themselves. These properties combined allow two mutually distrusting parties to directly and safely transact currency in exchange for a specified amount of work in a DOS attack. Since pay-to-DDoS transactions can be claimed by anyone, there is a risk to the collector that by the time they complete their DOS attack, someone else will have collected the payment. Any target specified by a pay-to-DDoS transaction could use their privileged position to turn the proof of work into a computational challenge. Since the challenge is no longer bound by the network, the target can claim the reward for themselves. Quickly solved pay-to-DDoS transactions with no degradation of service and sufficiently difficult proof of work could indicate to the bounty provider that the target is claiming its bounty. In addition, a potential victim website could disincentivize attacks by submitting pay-to-DDoS transactions that they can quickly solve locally. This would cause attackers to try to connect to them and eventually even collect a response that meets a target difficulty. However, When the attacker went to publish this to collect the reward, the victim could publish their proof, essentially double spending the pay to DDoS transaction. With some probability, the victim's transaction will win and prevent the attacker from collecting the reward. Over the long term, attackers may be wary of attacking such targets and instead require higher payouts for attacking them to cover such risks. While this new payment type allows a one-time payment for attacking a particular target, it cannot be used to update the long-term victim list used by miners to decide valid victims for blocks. Otherwise, miners could make a pay-to-DDoS transaction specify their own local domain in order to always have a local computation puzzle that allowed them to create new blocks in the future. Instead, a second method for choosing victims must be employed. Alternate proof of work 4.3.2 rather. In order to allow the victim list to be updated dynamically, DDoSCoin uses proof of stake to let currency holders make small changes to the list of acceptable victim domains. Using proof of stake ensures that updates are only done by actors that already have a substantial stake in the currency, either by purchasing it or by previously participating in the mining themselves. To update the list, a currency holder mints a proof-of-stake transaction similar to PeerCoin. First, they must hold the number of coins that have been unspent for more than 30 days. After the 30 days have passed, each second the miner hashes the aged transaction, a recent stake modifier block, and a current seconds resolution timestamp. If this hash is less than the current proof-of-stake target difficulty multiplied by the coin age being consumed in this transaction, then the currency holder is allowed to make a new proof-of-stake block. Inside this block, the currency holder can make one addition to or one deletion from the current victim list. The proof-of-stake blocks contains no Coinbase or CoinStake reward, and transaction fees are not collected. Thus, there is no direct short-term monetary incentive to produce such a block. The intention is that this will encourage only those with a vested interest in the long-term success of DDoSCoin to participate in updating the victim list. After this block has been published, miners must wait until 10 proof-of-DDoS blocks have been mined with the old list of valid domains before the specified data to the change list is applied. This discourages malicious miners from forking the chain at an earlier block with a proof-of-stake block, adding their local domain to the victim list, and immediately mining blocks on top of it to catch up to the main chain. 4.3.3 Difficulty Adjustment. The difficulty of proof of work changes dynamically in DDoSCoin as it does in other cryptocurrencies in order to limit the rate at which new blocks are mined. However, in DDoSCoins, the difficulty is adjusted separately for each target domain. Each victim domain has its own difficulty, since domains could have different maximum throughputs, allowing more or fewer connections from all miners over the same time period. Consider a single domain that handles many connections per second added to the target list. The miners would connect to that server more often, since it will give more chances at mining at a block, and thus receive traffic from other targets. DDoSCoin adjusts difficulty for a given domain by looking at the previous block_adjust blocks and counting the number of blocks mined against the given domain. This ratio is compared to the expected ratio based on the current size of the victim list and the time over which these blocks were mined, based on a timestamp included in the blocks. If more blocks were mined than expected, the difficulty for this domain is increased. Similarly, if fewer blocks were mined, the difficulty for the domain is decreased. This mechanism allows target domains that somehow become more difficult to reach to quickly return to a more appropriate difficulty without having to wait for many blocks mined at the high difficulty. A target's initial difficulty in DDoSCoin is decided by the stakeholder that introduces the target in a proof-of-stake block. If the stakeholder is incentivized to not set the difficulty too low, as many coins would be mined quickly, devaluing the stakeholder's own coins. If the difficulty is set too high, there will be a delay as other domains are mined and the difficulty adjusts down to the appropriate level. And I think we've got time for one more subsection before we're going to have to close this bad boy out. And so let's get into it. It's 4.4 Implementation. To evaluate the performance and effectiveness of DDoSCoin, we have implemented our proof of DDoS function in 582 lines of C. Our mining code uses libevent, my apologies here, and OpenSSL to create concurrent connections toward a specific target, crafting a client_random in the specified way and testing each response to see if it satisfies a hard-coded proof of DDoS target difficulty. We tested our proof of DDoS function miner against a quad-core TLS server under our control, running Nginx, serving the default page and connected to our attacker over a local gigabit Ethernet network. When running our miner, the CPU consumption of the server quickly reaches 100% utilization on all 4 cores, while the attacker only requires approximately 30% on a single core. This produces over 3,000 TLS connections per second and slows response times of the web server considerably. We used Apache Benchmark AB with 1,000 connections with a concurrency of 50 to quantify this, and tested the server under normal conditions, no miner running, and under DOS, miner running. As shown in Figure 4, we find that the average server response time increases by more than a factor of 6 when our miner is running. And yeah, we'll go ahead and break it off there. Unless... No, yeah, it's a bit more than I wanted to get into for the last 1 minute in our show. But we will be back again on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Sorry we didn't get to actually finish this. I mean, maybe if I'd have gone maybe a song or two shorter somewhere along the line, we would have been able to digest the entirety of this. But nonetheless, I think we covered pretty much what I wanted to cover. You know, what types of events they foresaw for using it, although I'm sure that would have been meted out a little bit more in the description of defenses that they'd theorized would be appropriate for this particular model of attack or a threat model. I don't know. I think there's some merit to it, and I've said this a few times that I think that things like batching and off-chain transactions, like Lightning Network and such, I think they changed the incentive structure a bit, and that the idea of just a white paper for a project like this existing, what it says to us is that there are potential adversarial actors out there. We have knowns, we have unknowns, and we have known unknowns, and we have unknown unknowns. And that's just the fucking universe you live in. And that number changes all the time, regardless of which one we're talking about. And so, this whole idea that we're going to be able to secure the universe and whatnot, no. What we can do, though, is encourage one another to participate in ad hoc networks such as the Bitcoin network, as miners. Be a part of the network. Be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. Anyway, it is with that I'd like to close out this episode. Thank you very much for listening. I certainly do appreciate the support. We will be back again on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and so until then, I want y'all to trade safe. Do your homework. And watch out for your own bunghole, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And as far as our last dance is concerned, I got a little bit of 5-finger death punch recently, along with our last batch that we got the latest body count on. And so I want to go ahead and throw something down from it. And yeah, it seems like this is appropriate. Bad Company, Last Dance, here on Coin Metal. Thank you again for listening, and y'all have an excellent evening. Good night.